Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Metro Flood Diversion Authority meeting of Thursday, March 28th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Here.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Steen?
Here.
Oh, he's on the phone. Dr. Mahoney? Mr. Pepcorn?
Here.
Mr. Grinberg?
Here.
Mr. Judd?
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Here.
Mr. Paulson?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Wayland?
Here.
Mr. Thorsted?
Here.
Mr. Olson?
Here.
Great, thanks everyone for joining us today. You have in front of you the minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any corrections or additions or a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Pepcorn, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda?
Cost reimbursement agreement.
Yes.
Item 8E.
We have the, yes, okay, very good. So we need to amend our agenda with the cost reimbursement amendment 8E. Can I get a motion to approve that?
So move. Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the agenda is approved. On to program management, item 4.
Hello.
Hello.
Right. So for the program management report, the activities and accomplishments that occurred over the last month, executed the PPA Amendment 1 with the Corps, securing $750 million from the federal government for the project. Coordinated with the Buffalo Red River Watershed District non-permit review. Furthered North Dakota legislative funding request with testimony to the House Appropriations. Submitted a brief to the federal court requesting partial lifting of the injunction. Distributed letters to all property owners whose land is affected by the project. The watershed, the Joint Watershed Resource District contracted with 7 appraisal firms for appraisal services. Those were 7 master services agreements. They also awarded 5 task orders to perform appraisal services. And continued refinement of the hydraulic model for the Clomar. April priority areas. The federal lawsuit hearing is on April 1st. The objective is to dismiss litigation and remove the injunction to move forward with the project. Continue outreach to local entities and the Minnesota DNR regarding the DNR permit status. Submit the revised Clomar to FEMA. Advertise for rural structure removals, putting that package together. Continue with early and voluntary land acquisitions. Appraisals for remaining property for the channel, and scoping for the next phases of ag impacts and flowage easement studies. Reporting on the overall program status and the Q1 2019 cash budget. The overall program status, based on the program budget of $2.75 billion, expenditures as of February 28th were about $457 million. Reporting on the fiscal year 2019 Q1 cash budget. Out of the $8.5 million Q1 budget to date, as of as of February 28th, about $3.1 million has been spent, leaving a remainder of $5.3 million. That's it for the PMC report.
Thank you. Any questions? All righty, then we'll move on to the administrative legal report. Mr. Shockley, do you have anything for us? Okay. The only thing I would add to that is that we had a discussion earlier regarding reigniting our search for an executive director. And perhaps I could get Mr. Wilson to kind of give an update on where we're at in that process.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good afternoon. Just again, a quick update for you. At the direction of the chair, the Executive Director Search Advisory Group has had a number of conversations over the last couple of months and formally met or met informally this afternoon with our consultant, Pam Derby of CPS Consulting this afternoon, just to talk about the parameters of moving forward with a renewed search. And it was really the direction of the chair and the members of that advisory group that we move forward, and this is more or less an update for you that we would, there's an agreement there that would really, this would just be an expenditure really of expenses moving forward, and then if a successful candidate was identified and placed, there would be a $10,000 reimbursement or payment for that successful completion. This was really the financial parameters of this. We can move forward as through the powers of the executive director, but this was really the informational element of that we wanted to make sure that you were aware that is moving forward, was initiated at the direction of the chair, and then at the concurrence and of the rest of that working group. And I'd stand by for any questions or input if you had any.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So our timeline for this would be, why don't you run us through that if you happen to have it? I don't remember it right offhand.
Absolutely, and the reason we are bringing this forward to you in this matter this afternoon is, again, we've had some individual conversations leading up to this, but this was the first opportunity to really engage with the consultant as that advisory group, and the consensus of that advisory group is they would like to move forward in an expeditious manner. Following board meeting after this would be a month from now, and the consensus was they'd rather not lose that month. And so what we would look at doing as far as a timeline is the brochure that would be used would be approved by that working group the first week of April. And this is very similar to the one that was used on the last time the search was in process, which was February of 18, and then final approval from that search committee for the updated book would be April 5th. Put it out in the market the week of April 8th, and then aggressive outreach and looking for candidates and reviewing those candidates between April 8th and May 13th, and then the selection activities would begin middle of May, moving forward with selection committee interviews tentatively scheduled somewhere in that first 1 or 2 weeks of June.
Thank you. So when we did this the last go-around, we felt like we were pretty successful in getting some quality candidates, but there was a lot of concern because we didn't have a permit at that time. And now we do, and things are moving along, and you know, when is the right time? I think now is the right time personally, but I'd certainly like to see this board weigh in if you have any questions or concerns or comments about moving forward.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the update. I don't have any concerns about moving forward. I'm excited about the next phase, and I think I can't speak for Robert and Michael, but I'm sure they're ready to relinquish their duties at that point when we make a decision. And my memory serves right, we have amended this search to broaden just from a pure technical candidate to a leadership and management as well as maybe technical, so we might find a different pool that give them what's the right skill set to take the reins, and that makes me comfortable.
Great, thank you. I couldn't agree more. So I think it's very timely. We did change some things between the first go-around and the second go-around, and some of it was just our marketing and right down to the brochure and how the metro area and the community was marketed, and I think we had a really positive response from those changes, and we're really concentrating a lot, although it's a nationwide search, the upper Midwest particularly. I think that we can find a really good pool of candidates in that area too, so we're looking forward to moving forward. Okay, thank you. Anything else for administrative, legal? Public outreach, you met yesterday?
Yeah, Commissioner Sherling. Public outreach met yesterday. Talked about several things, including an update on the North Dakota legislative, what's happening in Bismarck. And also on the lands outreach activities, talked about that, talked about the letter that went out, talked about a letter that Cass County Joint Board will be sending out shortly. It'll probably be the first part of next week, just identifying us as the ones that will be purchasing their property. Outreach to the Minnesota counties. I want to thank Commissioner Sherling and Commissioner Campbell for their effort, great effort to Otter Tail and Becker counties, and understand that they were very welcomed and answered questions for about an hour. And why is that important? Why are these two counties, which are miles away from this community and actually on higher ground than we are, why is that important? It's because they appoint a couple members, or a member from each county. Otter Tail and Becker sit on the Buffalo Red Watershed District. So they are important, and they were open, and actually they do not support the action that Buffalo Red has taken on the permit. Okay, at this time I'd like to call on Tammy Joe. She's going to give us questions video that was made.
Hi, I'm Tammy Jo Taft. I do videos on the website, and this is a video that we just shot and edited this week, and so we're working on production of a few more 3 questions videos. So if you know of someone else that would be a good fit for one of these videos, please let us know, because we'll go out and ask them their thoughts on the project.
But until that period of about a week to 10 days where it really escalated, you couldn't believe that this was a reality. In our building, which predominantly at risk was our main site in Moorhead, it's everything. Do our boilers still work? Because we're still talking about a time of the year that's very cold. As important, do your sewer and water supplies work? So even if we could have held off the water, to be an island of ourselves is not a good plan going forward for any amount of time as well. Because of our early approach to the evacuation, we had access to some converted buses into ambulances. So when I talk about the folks who can't be transferred even in a wheelchair, need to be on a stretcher, these became the most important asset that we had in the transportation. When the hospitals decided to move, I can tell you, I don't think we would have had access to those. So that is really the fear I have going forward, is there isn't enough of those assets. In the case of some of our senior housing and assisted living residents, they went home with families for an extended period of time. And so what was hopeful was 3 or 4 days became 10 days plus. And so I would say that beyond our residents, it tested many people who not only had their own issues and the things that are going on in the community, but then had their loved ones who normally reside with us as house guests as well. In terms of total cost, I can't even put a price on it. Just the transportation alone had to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. for the state of Minnesota, I'm sure well into the millions in terms of total costs. The impact on our folks, it's hard to quantify. I know that for days afterward, I wouldn't call it post-traumatic stress necessarily, but it does really wear people down. We had no deaths, which is what we were told at the time, fairly common, and common to the extent that each resident is given a body tag, and one of the options is deceased. So you know that this is a pretty serious issue when you have to relocate that number of vulnerable adults in a very short period of time, and it wasn't, the gravity of our situation wasn't lost on us then, and it certainly isn't now. Because even for a period of 8 to 10 days, people really get nervous. Am I going to be able to come home? And the trauma and the different things that causes for folks is hard to measure. Flood protection, it means a sense of comfort, not only for those of us that live in the community, live in our communities, but who work here as well. And not having to continually every spring look over your shoulder. Are we going to have a slow thaw this year? How much snowpack do we have? Are we going to get a spring rain that's going to create problems we didn't see coming? And so, even on the years where you don't think you're going to have a problem, it's always something in the back of people's minds. I would say, as much as I commend all of the work that's been done, particularly on the Moorhead side, I think everybody in the community feels strongly that we need something more permanent. I've never pretended to understand the math. What I can understand is that from a metropolitan area and the assets and the infrastructure that we have here, that number doesn't seem to be that harrowing to me when you think about protecting what is Fargo-Moorhead. Anybody that lived through '09 knows why it needs to happen. But it's such a necessity to make sure that we've protected the greater good that's at play here. And if we can do that and try to meet the needs of the folks that we're impacting upstream, I think we'll find a happy place to be with this. But certainly the rural areas are the fabric of what makes up Fargo-Moorhead. Anybody that runs a company knows that you do a lot of things you don't like doing because it's for the greater good. And yeah, it's expensive. Yes, there's folks that are going to be on the wrong end of it. None of those things can be avoided, but it's still the right thing to do.
So you can see all of those at our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/fmdiversion. And like I said, if you have anybody that you would suggest doing one of those videos, just let us know.
Thanks, Tammy. Just one more comment. A lot of thank you has to go out to the people that have made the trek out to Bismarck and also to Minneapolis, to St. Paul, to support the project and to try to relay to legislators how important this project is to this area and to North Dakota. And I just want to thank you for the sacrifice that you have all made. Several of you have made trips out there, and just thank you for your effort. It's going to continue till the end of the session, I'm sure, for at least a couple more weeks, maybe 3 weeks. So it's kind of full court press till we get to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And thank you, Tammy Jo. That was great. Okay, moving on. Business Leaders Task Force update. I don't see Mr. Dawson here. Is anyone reporting on that? I know they've been heavily engaged in outreach, and I certainly appreciate that. Maybe they're off in Bismarck, who knows? Okay, thanks. And then item number 7, land management. Land management is in full swing right now, and getting phone calls since our letters sent out. I've been contacted by a handful of landowners as well. Every situation is unique, and we continue to strive to treat everyone fairly and as flexibly as we possibly can. We met yesterday, the Land Management Committee. We discussed a number of things, including the timeline for completion of the channel, which I believe is spring of next year. So there's some urgency to reaching out to these folks and getting that taken care of in the channel. But also in the fringe areas, a lot of questions from people on what kind of mitigation is going to be necessary in that fringe area that is unlikely to ever really see water. So that's a challenge as well. We also discussed crop insurance and engaging farmers in some of those discussions, and also talked about getting together a group to discuss cultural areas and cemetery impacts. And we did have some folks talking about that in the past, but we're going to kind of re-engage that now. We're not impacting nearly the number of cemeteries that we were before, but nonetheless, there are some that are impacted, so we need to visit with those folks about that. Eric, did you have anything else you wanted to add? All right, thank you. Any questions on land acquisitions or mitigation? Okay, then, item number 8, finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We met yesterday, March 27th, and we had a few items we discussed, and they are on the agenda, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. For the project summary budget for the month of February, total revenues equaled 4.8 million, while total expenditures were 1.8 million. The fiscal year to date, total revenue was 8.9 million. The total expenditures were 3.1. And our net position, we have assets right now of 91,074,820, with a couple receivables there, which for a grand total of 92,027,034. And with liabilities, total liabilities for the net position is 1,270,455. So we're in a net position of 90,750,279. That's it for the report.
Okay, thank you.
And then, can I go on?
Yes, please,
Okay, sure.
go on. Go ahead
Thank
with
you.
voucher, yeah.
Voucher approval and recommended contract actions. I'd like to call Kim up. Thanks, Kim.
All righty, sure. All right, so for the contracting actions, the co-executive directors approved 3 task order amendments. They were Task Order 1, Amendment 4 for material testing services for Work Package 43, Work Package 28, and Work Package 52. That's with Braun Intertech for $35,000. Task Order 15, Amendment 10, Draft Operations Plans. That's a change order for an added scope and budget for additional Corps of Engineers requested modeling and analysis. That's with Houston Moore Group for $140,000. And then lastly, it was Task Order 1, Amendment 6 for Beaver Creek Archaeology for Phase 1 Cultural Investigations for $15,000. And those cultural investigations, there was a question yesterday, so I included the location here. This is just a description of the locations that are requiring the cultural surveys, cultural investigations. And here's the map that shows the locations. You can see the one on the top is in the north end, and then there are 2 on the south. And then also, this was approved by, as I mentioned earlier in the PMC report, these were approved by the Clay County Water Resource District, right? Yeah, Clay County Water Resource District. It's Cass County. All right, Cass County, sorry. So this is for the appraisal services. It was 7 master services agreements and then 5 task orders to perform appraisal services. And these were approved by the Clay County, like we said. And that's it for contracting actions.
Okay, thank you. Questions or motion? Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg? Mr. Judd?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Paulson?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted? Yes. Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Okay. Next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. We had one additional item. You had a revised agenda sent to you earlier today, item 8E, and that is a cost share reimbursement agreement amendment that we have with the State Water Commission in Bismarck. We received a timely item yesterday, and that is just simply an amendment form, a one page that's in front of you at the dais this afternoon. It's a timely request that amends the agreement to allow our finance personnel to code expenditures against the cost share reimbursement. And so these are the same terms that we've operated under before. These were contained in Senate Bill 2020 that was approved by the legislature in the 2015 session. So it's a simple agreement that needs to be amended. The Finance Committee did unanimously consider this item as a recommendation to the full Board of Authority today.
Thank you. Questions? Or a motion?
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
or Chairwoman. I just had a question, Mike. We had this question that we went before, Mary, where we had to have the county approve, the city approve, everybody approve. Have we streamlined that in any way as far as a cost reimbursement?
It's a great question, Mayor, and for the benefit of the board, we can provide an update on that. John, Nate Borboom, myself, and Eric Dodds were actually meeting with the Water Commission staff on Tuesday, and I'll let John speak to that, but we have talked about trying to streamline those processes so we're not back before multiple boards to get a simple reimbursement. So I'll have John speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Diversion Authority Board. When we met with the State Water Commission on Tuesday, we discussed that specific issue, and the State Water Commission personnel agreed that we could have a resolution that would be passed by the Cass County, Cass Joint Board, and the City of Fargo that would just authorize the Diversion Authority to be the vendor to pay the bills instead of having those multiple approvals. We also discussed some other efforts to streamline the process. One of the positive items that came out of that meeting was that we could start submitting large payment requests, contractually obligated payment requests ahead of the time to pay them. So for example, when we have the P3 milestone payment, we can submit them that invoice without having to pay it first out of funds on hand at the city or the Diversion Authority and get reimbursed, and instead have the State Water Commission pay the bill directly. And we're still working out the specific details about that, but it was a positive meeting.
So John, you say that can be fixed on our part by resolution. It doesn't have to be in the amendment document. It's just something we would do or different entities.
Correct, and I'm actually preparing the resolutions as we speak, and hopefully we can get them on the next commission.
So that's
agenda.
actually a cost savings because now we're putting bills side by side. They're paying, we don't have to pay it and then get them. So we'll have more ability to use our.
Yeah, for future expenditures, for this one, for the current 6.6 that we would be seeking a reimbursement for, those expenses have already been incurred, and so the Diversion Authority will be getting a check back for about $6.5 million out of this amount.
So, Madam Chair, so I have a question. So this is the first time I've seen this, but so this is to approve, so then they can spend up to $66 million without having to go to each different group, is that correct?
Maybe I can clarify. So in the legislation from 2015, 2013, and 2017, the Diversion Authority received biennial appropriations of $66.5 million for the project. Those appropriations are obtained through the cost share agreement with the State Water Commission. This is an amendment to the cost share agreement to tap into the 2017 dollars. What the request is instead of having to go to each board to get approval for the reimbursement for funds already spent on the project, that the Diversion Authority, this body, could just request the approvals instead of going back through to each board. The Diversion Authority would still have control over the actual expenditures. It cleans up the reimbursement process so that we're not duplicating the same presentation before three different boards plus this board.
So, Madam Chair, so thank you very much. Once again, I'm a little bit slow on the pickup, so I didn't quite get it, but it's basically, this is, so you don't have to, this is money that's already been spent, and so it just makes it easier to, instead of having to do it for all three, for all separate entities, so thank you.
And it saves us time.
The mayor can vouch that I'm not that bright, so it takes me a little longer to figure that out.
Brighter every day.
Thank you.
Great questions, thank you.
Commissioner Sherling?
Yes.
Yes, and we did take this up at the Cass County Joint Board meeting this morning, just discussed it. We did not make a motion on it, but we are aware of it, and we do support the shortening of the process. Just one more thing. It would be nice when we submit a bill that the money is wired to us rather than a hard check. It just would be safer, I think, and it'd just be easier. There's some angst in our office to opening a letter with a $6 million check in it. And so if that could be handled, that would be much appreciated.
Don't you like hold it up? Lots of selfies.
Right. So, John, is there anything we need to do with this letter at this point? You're going to get the directives to the various entities, and we'll vote on them there? Is that how I'm understanding it?
We're actually asking for approval of the amendment today. That would allow the Diversion Authority to request the reimbursement for the 6.6 million out of the total appropriations in 2017 of 66.5.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mr. Judd?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Paulson?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. On to item number 9.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
There wasn't a motion to approve the vouchers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. Thank
Second.
you. Any discussion on the vouchers? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mr. Judd?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Paulson?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Okay, moving on then. Preparation for task orders 5 and 6. Kim?
This is just to give you guys a heads up that next month, we're going to be asking for approval for Task Order 5. Task Order 5 is for continuation of program management services. We're currently running under Task Order 2, Amendment Number 2, which expires April 30th. So continue program management services, we have to have something else in place. What we're looking at is for a full-blown program management services task order that has a small segment of P3 scope in it as well. That's to start or to initiate, to re-engage the P3 part of the deal. It's not to do the actual procurement. That would be task order 6, which would follow on. John, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, so, thank you. In respect to task order 6, we're holding on development of that until we hear more from the federal court regarding the injunction, the lifting of the injunction, and also the contested case hearing process. We felt that it was prudent to hold on that because we just don't know what is going to happen within the next month or two. That said, it's really critical to move forward with task order 5 because of the expiration of task order 2, which is relating to the PMC services.
Questions?
Staffing changes? Any changes in staffing, increased staffing with?
Depending on how the next couple of weeks go, if we're going to go in full swing, then yeah, we'd probably be adding staff. Otherwise, it's kind of like the status quo. We're aware of the expense of kind of loading a team up if we don't have the work to go ahead yet.
Madam Chair, then I presume that Finance Committee will be wrapping their arms around this in April? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we also discussed how they've been keeping appraised, or our administrators, co-administrators appraised as to what they're doing as well, too, so it's not going to be dropped on them with no warning either.
Great.
Legislature's going to adjourn on April 20th at 9:58 p.m.
Okay.
Can I second that, or?
Well, we look forward to needing to get moving on task order 5 and 6, especially with all the hard work everyone is having to do with this year's spring flood. It's more and more critical. I think everyone's seeing how we really need to get moving on this. It could have been done already, but it's not. Here we are. And hopefully we'll start moving some dirt this year. And I will just add to that, thank you, everyone. It's kind of, sitting from where I'm at, it's sort of like herding cats some days. You know, there's folks in Bismarck, and there's folks in St. Paul, and others going to DC, and Kevin and I keep meeting in Barnesville, and, you know, it's just one meeting after another constantly, and I know everyone here is really working hard on this, and if you're not, you're down probably filling sandbags. So appreciate everyone's hard work, and I can't say more. I'm just very optimistic that we're all our work is really going to pay off here, and hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later. Is there anything else? Mayor?
Madam Chair, I know item 8D is tabled. Is that going to have Chuck some more information come back to us? Is that what the deal is?
Yeah, as soon as we meet, as soon as the Finance Committee meets, we'll have more information for you. It was a good, long discussion. We just need more information right now from the...
So that was the only reason we delayed. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, anything else? And I just would like to add, Mayor?
When you're ready.
No, I just want to add, in addition to thanking this group here, thank all the staff and members of our audience, because I know you're all here and you're working hard on our behalf as well. Really appreciate it. Mayor?
I was delayed a little bit because we got an upcoming weather report came in today that actually everybody's prayers and a slow melt has really helped out. But we're probably going to have the height of the river less than what we had predicted. We have very favorable forecast today that will actually make some of our efforts slow down a bit. And so I just, the mayor, if we could sit down and talk here afterwards with two mayors and Mary and kind of talk about it a bit, but it appears that this favorable melt has really worked in our favor and continues to work in our favor. So the city of Fargo, what we're going to do is work on relooking at what we need and what we'll have to do in the next 10 days. Yeah, but I just want to say right now, with the sunshine out, and Mary's having this optimistic hope for the DA moving forward, it looks like we won't have a flood as high as they were initially talking about. So I think we all can be happy about that.
Indeed. Thank you, Mayor. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. We're adjourned.